Let the record reflect we've reconvened with all members present. Bob Landergan has been detained in New York City, and we may see him later. But please rise for a Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have a motion for the executive minutes of January 23rd and February 13th.
Move them.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Regular minutes of January 23rd, 2017.
Move them.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, there's one on page 4 of 10. It's, I think, Judy Carlson, not Judy Johnson, or Julie Johnson. Page 4 of 10.
Yes.
Yeah.
A minor correction.
Julie Carlson,
Oh, Julie Carlson, yeah.
not Julie Johnson.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion for the regular minutes of February 6, 2017.
Move them.
Second.
Any discussion or corrections?
Is this executive or regular?
This is a regular. We did the two exec, so this is just a
Right.
regular special meeting.
So, okay, no, there's nothing on that one. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and a motion for the regular minutes of February 13th, 2017. So
Move 'em.
moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, there's on page 4 of 11. On page 4 of 11, it's Stalker, not Stacker.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. All right, welcome all. And for those that were here at the last meeting, I apologize. It's always been my goal to get through our borough business in a timely manner, and we not only went past my guideline of 10 p.m., we went past my guideline of 11 p.m., but we got our work done. And it sometimes happens, especially during the budget season, but hopefully we'll, I think we have a more modest agenda today and should be through it in a timely manner. It's been quite an eventful last 2 weeks, and especially with the fire downtown a week ago Sunday, and I just want to share some of the thoughts that I share with Chief DeRosa, along with a few other observations. I just so happened to be driving through town just as the alarm had gone out, so I was able to pull to the side and watch the fire department respond to the call, and for the first time, I think ever, get to see and witness the action from initial mobilization to the actual firefighting. And certainly, in a word, it was impressive. It was a very well-coordinated event from the very start, with our police department dealing with traffic and crowd logistics, and even assisting with the laying out of the hose. And one of the lessons I learned is with the, I don't know whether it's a 4-inch or a 6-inch hose, but you better have it laid out properly, because once there's water in that, you're not moving it too easily. And so they were all working to make sure they were mobilized very quickly. And there was no hesitation in calling the other fire departments, and that certainly is key to keeping property damage to a minimum. And we were able to have 3 aerial trucks on site. Of course, our own truck was joined by Chatham's in the front, and in the rear was Morristown's aerial truck. Again, having those mutual aid resources incredibly valuable. And it was amazing to see how well the mutual aid works, with so many fire companies on the site to support our efforts, working so actively. Some were very active, such as Morristown and Chatham. Some were just ready in case the worst case occurred with a fire spreading to multiple buildings, and thankfully it didn't. And as Chief DeRosa described it, everyone working so well together is organized chaos. There was no shouting and all that. There was just a ton of people knowing exactly what can be done. And for those that may not be aware, but the founding of Madison, the incorporation of Madison as an independent town, came off of a devastating fire in the commercial district. It led to Madison's desire to create a water system that would protect our downtown And actually, water for our residents was secondary to providing the fighting system in the downtown. And that move, along with the creation of Madison's career and volunteer fire department, has protected our downtown ever since. And last Sunday's fire once again demonstrated what a great fire department we have in Madison. The response time was measured in seconds and not minutes. And I've learned this morning that based on the charring and the condition of the apartment, that the fire temperatures probably approached 2,000 degrees within that apartment when the flames were at its worst. And had that response not been so quick and not the extra trucks there on site from the mutual aid, that fire could have breached the roof, and with the possibility of spreading, our downtown could have been devastated. But again, having a fire department that can respond so fast makes an incredible difference. And not to be lost in it, there were no injuries to the residents or firefighters. And that demonstrates the value that our department training goes in for every crew members, have them ready for anything. And of course, in addition to all our career and volunteer firefighters, along with our police officers, I can't forget to thank our volunteer ambulance corps. They were ready on site to assist anyone with injuries. And all the neighboring departments are responding with mutual aid, including the sheriff's office and support from the county. And thanks to the Red Cross providing housing for those displaced. And another example of what a caring town Madison is, we had our Madison police and firefighters working hard after everything was cleaned up, making sure the residents who were displaced had homes. And our residents have stepped forward. Within, I think, hours of the fire, I saw on Facebook a call for donations for the families who lost so much. And some of our residents have offered homes up that they have available, and others to get the displaced residents back into town as they're in hotels right now. So an incredible display of what makes Madison great in what could have been a devastating day. Another thing that happened this past week, last Thursday, was a peace march. The College of St. Elizabeth's, Fairleigh Dickinson, and Drew Universities, along with the Interfaith Council, organized a peace march to honor the life of Dr. Martin Luther King and his vision of the beloved community. And because of the school schedule, the march could not be held on his birthday, so the goal was to hold it in February in Black History Month. The march started at St. Elizabeth's and grew at each campus and neighborhoods as people joined in, until there were about 100 for the candlelight vigil on Waverly Place. And thanks to Chief Datchison and the Madison Police Department for their support, not only during the march and making sure everyone was safe crossing the roads and walking along the roads as they headed to downtown, but also going to meetings ahead of it with logistics and making sure we had the best route and the safety of all involved. And we worked closely with the Florham Park Police as they crossed from Florham Park into Madison. And I want to thank the marchers, all who respected the intent of the event. A positive event and supportive peace. It was not a protest. And not a negative sign was seen during the march. And one last shout out to Mother Nature, who gave us a 60-degree weather instead of a normal 20-degree February evening. So all in all, beautiful day. So thanks to many. And now I'm going to come down and present a couple of proclamations. Ellsworth Havens, please step forward. Last week we were a little low on the volume, and today I guess everyone can hear us, which is the way we should be with proclamations. I might hold this across the room. This is End Hunger 3.6 Day. Whereas every 3.6 seconds, someone in the world dies of malnutrition or starvation, and 1 in 5 children is hungry and relies on food stamps for their meals, and with number of people going hungry growing daily. Whereas there are more than 1 million people living below the poverty line in New Jersey alone. And whereas Madison Rotary End Hunger 3.6 project. Yeah. Maybe just another microphone. That sounds almost as bad as my singing. I did turn the other one off. It's a little bit, okay. I think we're a little high on the volume. Sorry about that. Whereas Madison Rotary and, yeah, we're too high on the volume. That's our, sorry. All right. We're new at this. I apologize. 1, 2, 3. Okay, maybe that's better. Whereas Madison Rotary Club End Hunger 3.6 project is a community event where volunteers package vitamin-rich, GMO-free, nutritious, non-perishable, ready-to-cook meals and distribute them to local hunger-based charities such as soup kitchens. And whereas this year's event will be held on Saturday, March 25th at the Simon Forum at Drew University from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. under the direction of Madison Rotary Club Foundation and Rotary Club of Madison. And whereas the goal of this year is to package 150,000 meals, require an estimated 600 community volunteers with 250 volunteers working each 2-hour shift. And whereas each meal costing about 30 cents, $110 provides someone in need a daily nutritious meal for an entire year. Now, therefore, I, Robert H. Conley, the Mayor of Borough of Madison, on behalf of the governing body, call upon the citizens of Madison to support End Hunger 3.6 project on May 25th. Thank you for doing this. March 25th, just making sure everyone is paying attention at home. That was March 25th. Thank you, Elder, for all the work. And if you'd like to tell a little bit more about the project.
Yes. It's not just you. Yeah. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Rotary Club, its foundation, all of our club members, a number of you are in the room, and more importantly, the tens of thousands of residents within our district that are food insecure on a daily basis, and hopefully the 150,000 meals that we'll be able to package on that day. Thinking about that, that's about 150,000 times we'll be able to provide a meal to someone that otherwise would not have a meal, which is an unfortunate circumstance, but something that we felt we needed to address. So two major things that we're doing right now are enrolling volunteers. We will need 600 to 700 volunteers on that day, so we're encouraging everyone to volunteer. And of course, the other side of this is the more money we raise, the more food we can package, and the more good that we can do, and the more lives that we can save. So hope to see as many of you as possible at the event. And that's a very good question. That's why you're mayor, probably. Simple to volunteer. You can go to our website, which is MadisonRotaryNewJersey.org. On the front page, there's 2 buttons, a volunteer button. You can click on that and volunteer. And there's also a donate button, because once again, the more money we raise, the more food we can package, and the more good that we can do. So go to our website, March 25th, all day long, and it's a great event. It's a great event. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming out, Elsa. All right, can I have Whitney, Riley, and Gwen please come on up? Or Whitney and Gwen. This is something new for Madison and a very special day. Whereas, first celebrated in 2012, United Nations adopted a resolution to bring about awareness of the International Day of Happiness, which is observed on March 20th each year to raise awareness of the importance of the pursuit of happiness and well-being. And whereas depression affects over 18 million adults in any given year and is a leading cause of disability for ages 15 to 44, and is a primary reason someone dies of suicide, resulting in over 38,000 deaths per year, making suicide the fourth leading cause of death for adults between the ages of 18 and 65. And whereas the Borough of Madison, the Downtown Development Commission, Madison Arts and Cultural Alliance, the Madison Area YMCA, Short Stories Bookshop and Community Hub, and the Madison Chamber of Commerce in collaboration with You, Me, We, will hold a town-wide celebration March through May to brighten Madison and shine a light on Depression and Mental Health Awareness Month, which is observed in May, by painting the town yellow. Whereas the borough will feature an exhibition of optimism, works by an array of artists featuring International Optimism Yellow, with the opening reception scheduled for March 11th from 2:30 to 5 p.m. at the Peg Williams Gallery at the Short Stories Bookshop and Community Hub. And whereas citizens can make a difference by brightening lives and the community through civic engagement, activities and collaborations, and by visiting participating shops and organizations in town throughout the months of March through May to view optimistic works of art. Now, therefore, I, Robert H. Conley, the Mayor of Borough Madison, on behalf of the governing body, hereby proclaim March 20th, 2017 as International Day of Happiness in the Borough of Madison to increase public understanding of the importance of the pursuit of happiness and well-being, and ask residents to show their support by wearing yellow on March 20th. Congratulations. Thank you for all this work. All right.
Thank you, Mayor Conley. For those of you who know me, I would have been wearing yellow tonight, but I unfortunately grew out of that, that portion of my wardrobe about 2 weeks ago. I just wanted to say congrats to all of those who participated in helping to bring this vision to life. Not only the Borough, MACA, the DDC, Lisa Ellis, the folks at Short Stories, and the list goes on, but also all the businesses as well that have come together. It's really highlighted, to me as a new resident of Madison, how amazing this community is and how it's hardwired to do good. And for those of you who don't know, International Day of Happiness is a resolution that was passed by the UN 5 years ago, and I was lucky enough to be on the committee a few years ago to help to come up with rituals and things that could help bridge it to the people, to help prioritize happiness, not just among communities and citizens, but around nations who want to really prioritize happiness. And so I co-founded You, Me, We as an organization to help to create tools and platforms to help engage communities and citizens to do just that. So International Optimism Yellow is one way that we've done that, and then this notion and project of Paint the Town Yellow, and Madison is the first to really embrace it as a town. So congratulations to the mayor and to the YMCA, who we partnered with as our local beneficiary, because we recognize that in focusing on optimism and happiness, we also have to recognize that there are a lot of people that do suffer from depression. It's a major illness that has inflicted many people across this nation and globe. And so we wanted to thank the YMCA for partnering with us so that we can both celebrate International Day of Happiness while also shining a light on depression. So thank you.
We're very proud to be part of this. Reports from committees, Public Works Engineering, Carmela Vitale.
I do not have any reports tonight.
That's all right, Nene. Thank you. Finance and Borough Clerk, Ms. Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I'd like to thank our CFO, Jim Burnett, because he's been working diligently and long, long hours on putting the budget together that you will see tonight, and providing alternatives to analyzing the budget and ending up with a great bottom line. And Carmel and I appreciate all the time you spent with us to go over this in detail. And from the payroll department, after much analysis and investigation, the borough will be switching payroll processing vendors to a company called Prime Point. Linda Sawyer and Sandy Emmerich called many references and visited a local municipality to see how the system worked. Customer service, price, and knowledge of local government pension and benefits were the prime criteria. And the result is we will be saving $15,000 a year with the change. So I want to thank Linda and Sandy for all their hard work. And we are also implementing a time clock system as well in all departments. From the Finance Department, the annual financial statement, I have a show and tell item, for the Borough of Madison has been prepared and will be sent to the Division of Local Government Services in Trenton. They are also posted on the Rosenet under the Finance Department. From the tax assessor, all property owners should have received notice of property tax assessment for 2017 in the mail a few weeks ago. It's a card that looks like this. So I hope you didn't lose it. This is an annual reminder that it is your right to appeal your property tax assessment. Instructions are on the back of the card or on rosenet.org. And tonight we will hear our 8th presentation to Council as it relates to the 2017 budget. As outlined at the beginning of the year, the hopeful goal is to form a consensus this evening so that the budget can be introduced on March 13th. Making a decision this evening is important because the CFO needs time to take our budget figures, compile them into both the state budget document and the user-friendly budget. It is also extremely important to introduce the budget by March 13th in order to stay on track with the state's best practices checklist. Failure to introduce the budget on March 13th could result in the loss of state aid from Trenton. So, important night tonight. Thank you very much.
Utilities, Mr. Wolkowitz.
Thank you, Mayor. The KRE project is continuing to be a focus of our utility departments, this time around in particular electric utility, where they completed the cutover from existing overhead primary voltage cables to new underground primary voltage cables, and that provides service to the adjacent properties of the KRE development. They're also beginning the removal of overhead cables and poles at this location. You may recall several weeks ago we had a damaging storm hit town. The repercussions of that storm are still being felt in that the electric department continues to repair poles and overhead cables on Greenwood Avenue. The rest of the month for the electric utility was more typical of streetlight repairs, service upgrades, and basic mark-out requests. The water department has been spending increasing time at Well D. First of all, the redevelopment of that well is ongoing, and the painting of it as well has begun. The department also was at a pre-construction meeting for the North Street pump station repairs, and the Elm Street construction tie-in, shutdown, and flushing took place. So there's a lot of beyond just basic maintenance going on in both departments. Thank you.
Thank you. Health, Mr. Borough.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Move this back. Just two quick items. First, the health department has been working with the retail establishments in the building that burned downtown to help them get opened up again, and they are expecting that with their assistance it'll happen in the next 10 days to 2 weeks. And second, the school immunizations audits are complete. Thank you.
Thank you. And Community Affairs and Public Safety, Ms. Byrne.
All right, I'll give public affairs, public safety first. To piggyback off of the mayor's report, the fire on Main Street was a 3-alarm fire. It eventually involved approximately 75 firefighters from 13 different fire departments, including Florham Park, Chatham, Morris Township, Cedar Knolls, Morristown, New Vernon, Green Village, Morris Plains, Chatham Township, and Whippany. In addition, Summit and East Hanover fire departments came and covered the town by standing at headquarters in case there was another fire. So this truly was a case of cooperation amongst neighbors. From the police department, on February 16th, the department, the PBA Local 92, and Mayor Conley brought the last of our annual toy drive donations to Overlook Hospital. To date, the annual Toys for Tots toy drive has donated more than 17,000 toys to needy children. During the week of February 20th, Corporal Glab was nominated by Chief Dashison for the Mothers Against Drunk Driving Award for the year 2016. Corporal Glad made the most DWI arrests for the police department, keeping our roadways clear of impaired drivers. The Madison Police Department has applied for a distracted driving grant in the amount of $5,500. If awarded, this grant will focus on enforcement for violations such as texting and driving and using a handheld device. And then community affairs. The Tri-Town 55 Plus Coalition Rides for Seniors project has moved into high gear with orientation sessions for seniors 65 and older scheduled at both the Chatham and Madison Senior Centers in March. The Madison event is at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, March 14th in the Great Room. The sessions will familiarize seniors and their families with how the program works and how to register prior to the April 1st start date. The paper or online registration is done by calling GoGo Grandparent at 1-855-464-6872 or by going online to Tri-Town 55 Plus, spelled out plus.org, which also has a list of frequently asked questions about the program. The program will include information on how to access the service and hours of operation, now scheduled for 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. The Tri-Town 55 Plus Coalition will subsidize each one-way trip up to a 15-mile radius at a cost of $5. Riders will be able to travel as far as Morristown, Florham Park, Summit, Berkeley Heights, New Providence, and Millburn. The coalition is working with GoGo Grandparent, an on-demand transportation company based in California, to offer the 3-month pilot program April through June on a trial basis. And finally, I would remind everyone once again that the Taste of Madison will be held on Monday, March 20th at the Park Avenue Club, and invite everyone to attend and see what our wonderful restaurants have to offer.
Thank you. Any communications petitions?
Yes, Mayor. Mayor and Council received a letter February the 17th from Chris Score of Shade Lawn Drive, thanking the Mayor and Council for formally declaring Madison a welcoming community.
I'm going to sneeze. I stifled it. I've been echoing through here forever. All right, invitation for discussion. This actually will be the first of 3. We'll have a separate one on the budget, so if you want to comment on the budget, we'll give you a chance to do that after the council has had the presentation and before they do their final discussions on it. So you may, on this one, you may comment on other items on our agenda, which include the purchase of 2 bucket trucks and the purchase of police radios, and the 2017 electric utility rebate program, or you may comment on any resolution. Ordinances will have a hearing, and so you have to please wait for the that section of the agenda to comment on any ordinances or the next or the final discussion period. So anyone that wishes to comment on those discussion items or any resolution, please step forward, state your name, your address, and the agenda item you're discussing, and write your name and address on the clipboard. Anyone wishing to comment, please step forward. Seeing none, I close this part of the meeting. And we go to the budget presentation, discussion, and CFO Jim Burnett.
Thank you, Mayor Perry. Copies of this presentation will be on RoseNet, and there's copies over there if anybody wants to grab one to be able to mark it up. Thank you very much. Wanted to step right into it, Mayor, and talk about what this enclosed budget includes. This is very similar to what we reviewed a few weeks ago. There are some minor changes we'll go over, but the enclosed budget here includes a $1 million annual electric rate adjustment or dividend. There's two different ways to say it, but in essence, it's funds that the electric utility has generated this year that council has discussed wanting to give back to all of the electric users in 2017 through a monthly credit to their electric bill. It includes a revised 5-year capital plan that fits within the long-term budget, which was a concern we had at the last meeting. It includes over $7 million in capital funding, including an immediate funding of the $1 million Central Avenue water main project that we talked about. It includes expanded reliance on predictable revenues and significant reduction in use of utility surplus for fund operations. That's in direct response to the strategic planning guidelines that were developed by that committee and by the charge that council put on through adopting those guidelines via resolution. As we've discussed in the past, the new construction will generate $121,000 in new municipal taxes. We've recognized that through a separate line in the budget summary. We are moving the water utility towards better sustainability through shifting some of the expenses over to the electric utility. It wasn't really quite even. We had a $2.2 million water utility and a $22 million electric utility, and water is billed quarterly, electric is billed monthly, and we had some costs that were split 50-50, so we kind of shifted them to be 75-25. Doing that helped the water utility shift towards sustainability. The overall budget increase is a manageable 1.86%, and I have to pay tribute to all the council liaisons for working for their departments and all the department heads for working to keeping the costs down as much as possible. As mentioned at the last meeting, with one additional thing, I think that there's 5 real main points that the council needs to focus on here. And one is capital, what's the right amount? Second is shifting towards the reliance on more predictable revenues. Third is spending, and are the services that we want provided, should they be enhanced or reduced, or is spending in line? Next is taxes, what's the right amount of taxes? And then electric utility surplus, what should be done with the excess? Talked about $1 million there. So those are some of the guidelines that we talked about. So, I'm going to get closer to the mic. Okay.
I have a question, Mayor. When do you want to discuss those items or have comments by the council members?
I think when we get to the, we have the charts coming up with, yeah, so I think when we see those numbers, so we have the.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Robert, I'll try to talk without causing feedback. Okay, so capital. The last meeting, February 6th, we were concerned because the 5-year capital plan in years 18, 19, and 20 had $5 to $6 million. Administration worked with the department heads and the engineer to reduce those capital needs for 2018 to 20. They're summarized here. Council received those on Friday. Some were, major shifts in what was being done. Some were more administrative corrections in terms of what we were assuming versus what that department was thinking. For example, the library, we just didn't have the right numbers embedded in there, so the library's numbers looked much higher than they really were. And so those items are listed there. And as a result, the capital for the 5-year period here, we're really looking at the general capital number. We're not looking at, we're looking at the blue line here. We're not looking at electric or water. That number is much more in line. We're looking to fund annually in the budget $3.8 million. We think we can appropriate $4.2 to $4.4 million a year because we have annually capital ordinances that are closed and money is reverted back. State aid comes from the state of New Jersey for DOT projects and alike. So we're able to scale that back. 2017 doesn't really change that much, but it was just kind of an alert to the out years, and you all spoke to your department heads and they were responsive, and we were able to make some serious adjustments to that and fix that problem. So are there any questions on capital?
Yeah, I just think that perhaps you should explain the water utility number jumped up by $1 million.
Thank you very much. So we had talked at the last meeting that the water main for Central Avenue, which we thought we needed to do a part of after further inspection, the water utility actually went and dug pits and inspected it. Turns out it's a 100-year-old, very old pipe. If we're going to be, the plan is to totally redo that road, not just a mill and overlay, but complete curbs and everything. And it really seemed, given the age and the fact that we may not want to touch that road for another 15 years after we do all that work, that we should replace that water main. It is a one-time fundable amount in that water utility of $1.49 million. That's not a sustainable dollar amount in the water utility. I think we're more in the $600,000 to $700,000 range going forward. So we're going to have to make sure that we work with our professionals and our internal engineering staff and the water utility staff to make sure that we keep those numbers manageable. But that's the explanation for that.
So we're still going to need to look at next year because you're saying we're somewhere between 300, maybe 400 and $600,000 over, but the out years we're now comfortably under the number that we can live with. So
that's
we're gonna have to
correct.
try to find out how to shift some of that stuff out.
That's correct, and we're going to talk about milling and overlay, Pat, where that might resolve some of it, where, not to let the cat out of the bag, but there's a resolution for a assignment of a contract for milling and overlay later on. The price came in extremely inexpensively through a county co-op from a very reputable company. So we're looking to, and Ray will talk to this point when we get to that, we're looking to maybe take some of what's in 2018 and do it in 2017 because we can do it within the dollars that we appropriated. So that happened after Friday when this document came out. That actually happened today, which is why that item was added on the agenda this evening. And we'll talk a little more about that. I think that will fix it. And but it is something we need to keep an eye on going into later on in the year.
And that is it's one of the most significant costs we have on the budget, and it's also one of the biggest variable items because it's really a lot of that's dependent on the cost of oil. And if the cost of oil starts to go north again, then we're going to be looking to have to scale back on the number of streets we can do with the given amount of money.
That's correct. That's correct. So with it being so inexpensive this year, that's why we're advocating for. It's kind of like if gasoline was $1.50, you'd go fill up all your cars and all your gas cans if you could. So it's the same situation there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll shift to the municipal budget and the operating surplus. So based on the numbers that I'm going to show you in a minute, there were just a few small changes that typically happens in February. We have been working with the Madison Chatham joint meeting on our sewage processing costs, and that number came down. We had an increase in RoseNet fees. However, that's almost being completely offset by revenue that we're anticipating from the Board of Education. For those that don't know, we have a single fiber network throughout the municipality, which is very unique. I don't know of any other municipality, to be honest with you, that has this, where all municipal and Board of Ed buildings are interconnected. One major internet pipe comes in to the library, and the borough, the library, and the Board of Education all benefit from that internet connection, the savings of the interconnectivity of the buildings, and the savings of being able to buy in bulk. The Board of Education has asked for an expansion of that, and so that just changed the numbers, but it changed the numbers both on the revenue side and the expense side. A police grant has come available that council is going to vote on this evening, and there was some slight changes in police overtime and expenses, and the net result is this budget format and these budget numbers here. This is a slight change in the budget format. All the same line items, so the folks like Tom and John, who all the other people who've looked at this for years and years, Dave and everyone, they're all the same numbers. We just kind of regrouped them differently. It was a legacy form that Robert Caliphate had put together a number of years ago. We reoriented this, so we have 33 lines, which looks like a lot of numbers, but for me it's not a lot, but maybe for the general public it seems like a lot of numbers. But in the end, I'm really asking you to focus on 7 numbers, which are line 6, which is recurring revenue, line 11, which is utility surplus and non-recurring revenue, line 13, utility surplus, and these are all the gray lines, so it's pretty obvious to see them on the line here. Line 23, municipal operating, line 29, non-municipal and outside the cap operating expenses, line 32, total capital and debt, and then line 33, which is the total appropriation. So with that, I'll point to some important things to note about revenues. Again, to align ourselves with the strategic planning guidelines and what council has asked for, we're looking to shift away from less predictable revenue, which I would say the utility is less predictable. We don't know 5 years from now if we're going to be making that. Grant revenue is volatile every year, so we split that out from state aid, and those items are under number 11, which are utility surplus and the non-recurring or less predictable revenues. Line 6 is the recurring revenue, which is our municipal surplus, our sources of revenue, which are the fees that we bring in, construction fees and license fees and alike, and then property taxes and state aid. And then the third line is the total utility surplus for capital and debt. But what's important to note, and what's great about this budget, is the shift away from line 11 and using line 6 to fund more of it. So line 11, the utility surplus and non-recurring revenue is dropped by 17%. That's excellent. If we can keep that going for the next few years, that would be an excellent thing. The total recurring revenue is picking up the slack from that, and a lot of that is due to line 4, which is the property taxes for new ratables. At the last council meeting, and there's a presentation online, we talked about splitting out property taxes for our homes and then property taxes for new ratables. So it's a 2% increase for property taxes for existing homes, existing property, but any new ratable that came on, whether it was an addition that was put on the house or a totally new house, which we've seen some new houses come online, those houses, just with our tax rate, will pick up an additional $121,000 in revenue from those. So that really helps to shift us away from the non-recurring to the recurring. I want to point out, and this isn't in your presentation, I slipped this slide in late, it is in the paper ones here, that state aid's going to get announced tomorrow. We don't anticipate there being a change in state aid. It's been flat at 808,529 for a number of years, but you never know. We'll see what happens tomorrow. If it goes down, you'll hear quickly from me. So, yes.
So I'm happy with the direction that the budget's heading. And the one thing I will note, though, is that because we're expecting our debt service is going to increase in the next several years, because of the commitments we're going to have to make. Okay, I don't want to echo. For the joint meeting, we may want to start to show the cost of the debt service with the rest of the capital, since that's the way we group it. Sorry. Because if that's going to increase, we may have to make a slight adjustment in our other capital spending as well. We're going to keep our total capital costs at a roughly even amount, or maybe with a small increase every year.
That's a good idea. So we'll make sure when we're reviewing 5-year capital that $4.2 million bogey may move to a $4 million bogey if we know we have to pick up another $200,000 in debt service. Okay.
Thank you.
I like it.
Anything else on this page? Okay, Jim?
Okay. Bear with me here, I apologize. So shifting to the operating expenses, the 3 lines that I had highlighted in gray that we talked about, there's total municipal operating expenses, non-municipal outside the cap operating expenses, and then total capital and debt. And we are showing it together here as Pat talked about, but I think we need to be thinking about if line 31 is going to go up, the debt service line, then maybe line 30 has to go down a little bit. That's what Pat was was talking about, but a manageable amount of our debt service, mostly an $80,000 short-term note that we had to fund our revaluation, we no longer have. We had it in 2016, we don't have it in 2017. That really represented the majority change. Obviously, capital improvement line 30 is the same, but a small decrease in debt and manageable increase in municipal operating were able to offset a larger than 2% increase in sewage processing and the public library. We worked with the public library. They reduced the electric funds that we give them for electric because they were able to put in some efficiencies in there. So that number comes down 10,000. But other than that, that number is statutorily driven by what's called the mill rate. So that number goes up by 3.4% because our statewide equalized assessed value went up. So that number is really driven by the state. The Madison-Chatham joint meeting number, which is line 26. Line 26 is driven by a board of both Madison and Chatham Borough elected officials that manage the sewage processing fees. That number is going up for a number of reasons. And historically, that number is not out of line with our total budget. If we went back and looked at the joint meeting costs in the 80s and the 90s compared to the size of the budget, it's not bad, but over the last few years, it's increased significantly. But in the end, these three major lines that I have grade here come to a 1.86% increase in total appropriations, which we're very happy with.
I just want to step back for one moment. When we did the refinancing of when we did the refinancing of the major part of our outstanding debt, is my recollection correct that the benefits of that start kicking in the fifth year? They didn't kick in at the outset. In fact, at the outset, the debt funding went up, but we knew that at the sort of the last 10 years of this transaction, it would more than compensate, and we were saving $1 million.
That's correct. I don't know my numbers here, but in the out years, in about 4 years, our debt service number for that outstanding debt that we refinanced will drop by $100,000 a year for the last 10 years, which results in $1 million savings by doing that. So that's something that we can look forward to. Maybe that offsets some of the increase that we're looking at for the joint meeting expenses, because there's talk about some capital that might be needed there that would generate, I believe it's about $300,000 increase in our debt service.
Yeah. We have some other revenue opportunities coming online when GVR gets built out. And I think at the time we discussed it, we were target that for capital as well. Yes,
that's correct. So what Mr. Councilman Rowe is talking about is the pilot payment from GVR. That's going to be the second largest taxpayer in the borough of Madison. And if you want to take the $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 that's being generated in that pilot, and in future years, council dedicate that to capital, that could really, or maybe half of it to capital, half of it to reduction on reliance of the electric utility. Those two, there's going to be some flexibility there. So the concerns on the joint meeting debt in the out years, there's some offsetting good news coming. Any other questions? Oh, I do want to point this out. That's right. Ben and I were talking about this today. So I think that flipped in. The department operating expense, line 21, people look at it and go, oh, my goodness, it went up 11.8%. Jim, what's going on? And it's part of the reason why we merge it all together into that single line to show a 2.5% increase. Because a lot of times items shift and costs shift from one line to the other. In this instance, there are 4 employees that were health department salaried employees, which are now covered by a contract with Bloomfield. So those employees' salaries then shifted over to become an operating contractual expense and were picked up in line 21. So line 21 went up by $354,000, but $200,000 of it is an increase strictly due to that Board of Health shift of expenses. But if you look at line 16, it went up by only 1%. And I can tell you the number of years, the 5 years I've worked, I've never seen a salary line that low. So that's much lower because of that. So I think it's actually really helpful, again, with the strategic planning guidelines in mind, that we're taking a look at that total municipal operating number as one single number and not worrying about what's happening too much with the numbers in between.
Looking at the health insurance, I meant to ask you this. Are we truly expecting that to be flat year over year?
What's that?
Health insurance line?
Yes, we are, because we had 4 employees that are no longer in health
It's strictly
insurance.
based on that.
It's based on that, and it's based on the fact that the state health benefits plan for us came out at almost a 0% change in
Okay.
premiums.
Thank you.
And everyone is under contract for their contributions. I think people may know that all municipal employees now are contributing to their health insurance up to 35% of their total, of the total cost of health insurance they're paying for. So that everyone's, all the collective bargaining units are still under contract for that. So
But that level didn't change year over year, right? I mean, we got to the 4th tier
I think
a
we
year or
got there
two
last
ago?
year, yes.
Okay.
Just saying that in the out years. I don't anticipate that to change. I know that's going to be one of our strong holds on the bargain. Bear with me here. So we're shifting now to municipal surplus. The municipal surplus, we just started talking, we were talking before about what maybe a business person would think of as the income statement. What happens throughout the year? What are the revenues? What are the expenses? Now we're shifting to what I would call the balance sheet, if you will. Surplus is excess of funds that the borough gets when a department head does an exceptional job and doesn't spend their entire budget. If we don't need all the money for fuel or for salt or alike, all that money comes back and reverts back to the borough in what's called line 10, cancellation of prior year appropriations. If we received revenues greater than we anticipated, we had a gangbuster year at the construction department. I think people could walk around town and probably find very quickly the areas where we're generating a large number of construction fees. So we had a bang out year there. The tax collection department, give them props. They really did a great job collecting, have a very, very high collection rate. So in any event, the municipal surplus at the beginning of the year of 2017 is $8.4 million. That's the little red arrow at the top there. We are using $4.58 million in the budget. So we're using well more than 50% of the surplus as it stands right now in the budget. I do want to point out down at the bottom here in the box, the $200,000 at February 6th council meeting, we voted to take $200,000 and put it in reserve for tax appeals. So had that flowed, the subtotal or free balance, line 3 would have been over $4 million. But still, we, as a CFO, just probably the one thing in the budget I want to just point to is I'm going to keep a tight eye on line 2 and line 3. Line 2 being how much we're using of surplus, and line 3 being how we're doing in generation and what's left over. So those are two important points. But in the end, you can see that the free balance number, line 3, which I think is the best single number to look at in terms of the financial stability of the borough, that number is holding well. So I think that's another good point I probably should have put under at the beginning, that our surplus looks great.
It may be worth reminding everyone that we initially, in the strategic planning effort regarding the budget, were focused on what's the right amount of capital. What's the right amount of surplus relative to the size of your operating budget. And as I don't know if you go through it later, but you've calculated the ratios. What it'll show is that we're north of where we need to be.
Yep.
So, there shouldn't be any concern about these numbers when you say things like we're spending X amount of what we generate. X is still turning out to be relatively low compared to what we could be doing and still be prudent.
I like to have more surplus than less. I like to have more surplus than less.
I know.
So,
It's a CFO's.
I know. So,
I like it up to a point.
any question on surplus? we'll shift to the water utility. As I said before, we're moving the water utility towards operational sustainability through managing some of the expenses. So if you look at the 2017 estimate for line 9 operations right here, you can see that the dollar amount dropped from 2016 over $2 million to $1.8 million. That made a significant difference in our ability to manage our sustainable surplus in the out years. We will still need to manage how much we draw from the water utility to support the municipal budget, but we're in a better situation. And also to point out, as Austria had mentioned before, the capital improvement, the one-time dollar amount of water utility surplus that's being drawn is reflected in this. And I should step back and say, unlike the last schedules we were looking at where we had municipal operations, the income statement, if you will, and then we flipped to a second schedule that had the balance sheet, because the water utility is a little easier and a little smaller, we're able to have everything on one page. So the top section of this is our income statement, if you will, showing, is our balance sheet. And the bottom section is our revenues and expenses, or our income statement. So if we focus on the water utility surplus, we can see that the balance at year end for the water utility surplus will still be over $1 million in 2017 and 18. And that's assuming that we can continue to manage expenses and that we continue to don't have any hiccups other than the Central Avenue water main. So the water utility is doing well. Any questions on that?
Really just two comments. One, I think, it does look a little tight, although I would guess that, especially with all the building activity in town, the revenue estimates for 2017, 18, and going forward will probably be north of what you've estimated. I think they're extremely conservative with a small c. The other thing is, if we could ever get the water meter program going, I think we could also generate additional revenue from replacing older meters with meters that are probably more accurately collecting the amount of water that's passing through them. So hopefully we can kick that into gear in the next year or so.
That's correct. That's correct. I mean, we did have a bang out year. You can see tariff collections line 6 for 2016 was without one of the highest. It was a very kind of surprisingly dry summer, surprisingly hot, not 100-degree days, but plenty of 90-degree days.
But it's pretty close to the number we pulled in last year. I mean, we did almost 2.7 last year. We did north of 2.7 this year. And it looks like after the recession died, 2.6, 2.5, 2.5, 2.7, 2.7. So
yeah. So
I know you don't forget there's GVR building coming online. Some of the things that are coming online, and new people moving into buildings that are already here. I think the water usage is not going to go down at this point. Our bigger problem may be that it's going up.
I think the 2.45, if you look at the history from 2010 to 2017, is CFO conservative, but probably a good number. Yeah. And I'd rather surprise you with slightly higher sales.
Austria and Ben?
How do our rates compare with other municipalities or water companies or whatever?
We did talk about this during the strategic planning process. Our water utility rates are 40% below investor-owned utilities that are in the area. There's towns that have their own individual water utilities, like Florham Park. There are towns that are on the Southeast Morris County Municipal Utility Authority, which is a municipal, but a collective of multiple municipalities. And then there are towns that, like Providence and others, that are on American Water. And when you look at American Water, which services the vast majority, those types of utilities service the vast majority of New Jersey, our water rates are significantly below that. So, an environmentalist would say, why don't you increase those rates a little bit to try to spur more conservation? But it's something that the council can and should look at in future years.
I actually was going to say something that's more or less what Austria just said, that, we look at these results, we should take into account that we're low man in terms of our rates relative to other suppliers. Although we've spent a lot of time focusing on electric rates, water tells a very good story for us.
you asked me what's the most predictable source of revenue, would be all the ones that were at the top there, taxes and surplus and municipal sources, but water utility surplus, once you get that in control, is more sustainable than electric because of the variability of the costs in electric.
Except for the electricity to pump it.
Carmella?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just want to make a comment. Over the years, like sitting here and listening to this water utility get more sustainable, which is like totally awesome. I think one of the reasons is that we're paying a lot more attention to the infrastructure. And I know that Bob has been working very industriously, to figure out, the size of the pipes and what's leaking and whatever. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind, so that we're not finding something like Central Avenue that's costing us $1 million. So I think that has helped over, a period of time. And I think that you're going to see, between the AMRs coming on and us taking care of the infrastructure, I think we're going to see a pretty good increase, if we take care of what we're supposed to.
I agree.
Simple.
Any other questions on water? Other than the fact that I'm thirsty and I did some. We'll shift now to the electric utility. Same concept here in terms of this bunch of numbers on the line here. I would say two main numbers to look at are the bottom of each chart, which is the free balance and the total surplus generated. As you can see, we had an excellent year in terms of cash collections in 2016. We initially thought we made over $23 million, but we were $7,000 short, which would have been close to, if not a record year for the borough. And we're estimating $22.4 million in the out years. Eventually our block contract costs will continue to go down a little bit, but we really finally turned the tide on the electric utility. We talked a couple years ago about knowing that this was going to happen, and it finally happened, where the block contract costs dropped significantly. Look at the difference in cost from line 8 for 2015 versus 16. That's a significant number. 2016, realized that we have split out capacity and other numbers, but still, that's a significant drop in those expenses there. And as a result, you see at the end of, you see the surplus at the beginning of 2015, the free balance at the beginning of 2015, this $263,000 meant the cupboard was basically empty. We had no money left in the electric utility. At the end of 2016, we're definitely heading in the right direction, and or at the beginning of 2016, at the beginning of 2017, we see ourselves in a very good situation. Because of that, administration is suggesting an electric rate adjuster or dividend to be given back to the customers of the electric utility. It will be based on a percentage of kilowatt hours consumed, and we are suggesting $1 million. That line is reflected here in 5A. What I should have done, and I thought about it this afternoon, but I won't make too many changes to things, is I should have put here one more line, which was we have free balance after January 1, after the surplus transfer. So we have $9 million at the end of the year. We transfer $7 million. We have $2.8 million left. I should have then put down, after the dividend, what's really, really left. And so if you subtracted $1 million from that 2.8, we're at 1.8 million. So that's kind of that free balance number that we had talked about.
Oscar?
So I totally appreciate that we do have a robust surplus and that we do want to make this adjustment. And I want to be conservative also, because I don't want to be in a situation like we were years ago. But could the rate adjuster go up a bit more and give back to the residents, given the robust free balance number that we are projecting for 2017?
So I think 1.5 million would, if you played that number out, I think that number could work. There was talk about wanting to have at minimum of $1 million in free balance. I kind of adjusted that and said, I really want to have 1.5 million. So if you subtracted 1.5 million from that $2.8 million number, we're at 1.4 million. So I would say that would kind of be the top threshold, and I think that if we have maybe a little bit better than expected sales in the out years, we could maybe continue that. But certainly for this year, I think if council wanted to do 1.5 million, we could make that happen.
And you would say top threshold without causing major fluctuations?
Correct, yeah. What I would not want to do is say, hey, we got $2.8 million there, let's give $2.2 million back, and then next year there's absolutely no change in the utility bill because we can't afford it anymore. So I think that the 1.5 million potentially has some sustainability, or at least a soft landing, as opposed to 2.8 million and nothing. So correct.
Ben, did you?
I did. Carl, you-
Okay, we'll stay on this.
I was just going to make a comment. I absolutely agree about the 1.5 million. And I just want to make sure that, in 2018 and 19, we stay at that 1 million so that we know exactly what's going to go on. We don't always know. We've done a great job with buying the electricity and whatever, but, that this is dependent on weather and what this is going to look like. I think that, Austria and I have talked about it over the last couple of days, and I think that, the residents kind of deserve that 1.5. So I'm total favor of that.
And as was pointed out when he did the ordinances, it's an annual resolution, which gives us that, sense of security.
Yeah.
Ben, and then Pat?
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to point out is that there are a number of ways to get to this number, to this calculation, and some of it has to do with give and take in other aspects of the budget. The decision of the council, which I very much support, is to look at the electric utility as if it's a standalone entity.
Right.
And so what's happened here is you look at how much revenue you have, subtract costs, put a sort of rainy day, unanticipated contingency fund together, subtract from that your best estimate on how much capital you'll need, and what's left is the surplus number. So going from 1 million to 1.5 and still having a bit over 1 million, well, a fair amount over 1 million in free balance, I think is prudent, and I would certainly support that.
Pat?
So what does that equate to? Excuse me, but what does that equate to? Like about 8%?
About 7%.
7%?
6.8 is what I just.
Well, actually,
Taking my
you can't just take that total divided by the total revenue, because I think we agreed that
That's right, yeah. Some of that.
90% of that is what is actually billed at the kilowatt hour rate, and the rest of it is other charges. So you take that number and divide it by 0.9, and it gets you the real number. Yeah, I had looked at this again last fall, ran a bunch of scenarios. 1.5 million was sort of the minimum I felt we should be able to do this year, for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't want to have it go bouncing up and down. Whenever you're looking at a rate cut, whether it's just for an annual renewal or not, you want people to have some degree of certainty. But on the other hand, you also want to make sure that the people who paid the money last year are getting the highest benefit this year. You're not stretching it out too far, because that's not really fair either. That's why I always prefer just doing a straight rate cut. I think Jim's also been very conservative about how much electricity revenues are going to be this year, and we've still been debating about what we think our transmissions costs are going to be in the out years, because I don't think JCP&L is going to get anywhere near some of the numbers that we projected here. So I think this is, again, a very conservative number, and I don't think that it's going to be a problem and I think we'll be able to sustain 1.5 for at least several years, until our contracts sort of level out, which is at least, I think, 3 years away.
And to your point about the demand charge, this does not affect the demand charge, which means the residents would actually see slightly more than a 6.8%.
Right.
Yeah.
And the commercial high-end users would see a little bit less.
We're going to start working on how that split works. As we've talked about, it's only on the kilowatt hours consumed, so you're correct on that regard. And we've been working with our billing software company to actually execute this. It will be a separate line right on your bill. You'll see it. We'll debate, or let you all debate on what you want to call it, whether it's rate adjuster or dividend or what have you, but that line will show up as a negative on people's bills based on the consumption that month. As I had said at the last meeting, I'd like to do it again here. I'd like that to start in May, because I'd like to get through budget introduction in March, budget adoption in April. We're going to be testing this line item and this calculation in March. I'll feel real comfortable by the first part of April, and then in April we'll have the budget adoption, and in that I would ask for the resolution to be voted on then to be effective May 1, and it would go May 1 to April 31. It's a little bit off what we had talked about.
April 30th, so we don't...
April 30th, yes. I don't know that time. It would go from May to April the following year. And that's a little bit off from what we talked about, but that's from a budgeting standpoint and from kind of a process standpoint. I think it's appropriate to vote on the budget because this number is baked in the budget, and then have that dividend.
And since it's a resolution, it's one instead of introduction and hearing.
Correct, yes. So it would just happen on hopefully budget adoption in April.
Maureen, and then we can go back to Ben.
Yeah, no, I think it's really, I've been going May through April. I think it's really important that it tracks the budget. And I think it's really important. I know we're debating what we're calling it, a rate adjuster or a dividend, but I think to Ben's point, that we look at the utility as a standalone business. A standalone business would call this a dividend. I think the risk of calling it a rate adjustment is that we can really only project out, 4 or 5 years of this. I would be afraid in 4 or 5 years if this were to disappear, that it would look as if we were raising electric rates, which we would not be doing. So I think calling it a dividend makes it clear what it is and what it isn't.
I would just ask that. I'll have to check. I don't know if it's something I can change on the fly in the system or whether it's something that's going to get baked in. So maybe by budget introduction, you all can talk and decide. As a CFO, I lean towards dividend. The ordinance talked about it in a slightly different way, but I'll let you all decide that.
I think the bottom line is whatever we call the residents will appreciate it.
Yeah.
Ben.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to, without getting into the nomenclature again, I just wanted to emphasize that this is not a rate reduction in a permanent sense. And that's very important because, as has been said, if next year, say we couldn't go to 6.8, but we could go to 6, it would be a shame if our residents turned around and said, they just raised my electric rates by 0.8. That would not at all be the case. The base rate is what we're paying now, and these are adjustments to it. Now, if over time we have a pretty steady level at which we're giving money back, then I'd say, sure, let's have a rate cut. But I'd like to see this happen over a couple of years.
Well, I think the other thing that will be happening in the out years is when we have new meters, we will be revamping our whole rate structure, which will give us an opportunity not only to change the structure for peak and non-peak, but also look at
Right, good point.
rate. Carmela, are you waving at me or?
In deference to Mike Soriano, I do want to say that we're going to pursue having a rate analysis done this year, so we have a better understanding of all the rate how we compare against the investor-owned utilities. I think it's just important for us to know that. So in the out years, if a permanent rate adjustment occurs or if you want to apply this dividend in a different way, we can do that. We'll have more knowledge.
So as we work towards the final slide and then eventually some comments from the audience, just want to capture the consensus that 1.5 is what we'll move forward with in your marching orders. The other thing I want to mention right now is, because we have some students in the audience that are sitting in here and seeing how government works, that this is a conversation you would not see in too many towns in New Jersey, let alone the country, that there are 8 other towns that would have this conversation about their electric utility, something that Madison is very proud of, and you can see the benefits of having an electric utility. So make sure that's in your term paper. All right.
Thank you, Mayor. Shifting over to the strategic planning guidelines, this is something that we want to produce on a yearly basis to show how we fit within the guidelines. The guidelines are brought on annually via resolution, and we talked about these before. Anything that happened in terms of changes to from the prior presentation to this, things moved generally in a positive direction. Guideline 2B got better, which is our year-end municipal surplus to total appropriations. That number got a little better. And the water utility used in operations, the operation shortfall, that number got a little better, guideline 2. We talked about this before. The guidelines are there, and in talking to Tom about this, they're here to create discussion, and I think we've pretty much woven this discussion throughout the entire budget process about the understanding of the operational shortfalls, the right amount of surplus, and alike, all the other items that are captured in these strategic planning guidelines. So I don't think we need to go over them too much, but I think it's a testament to that whole process that throughout the entire, we've had almost 6 to 8 budget presentations of some sort or another that these tenets keep coming up. So with that, are there any questions on the guidelines? Okay. Also part of the strategic planning process included 2 formats to show budgets in a different way, and this is really for the public. I'm comfortable with the first summary that we had that had 33 lines, but that's because I've lived it and breathed it and consumed it for years. But for the average resident, shrinking it down to 7 lines, 15 lines is just a little easier. So this format shows in maybe a different way, a clearer way, where expenses are going, how capital's being funded and the like. And this is something we want to continue to put out there. And then new this year, but not new to strategic planning, is kind of a budget flow chart, which shows how municipal surplus flows. True surplus is our free balance. That's the upper left corner there. It talks about our utility surplus and how much of it is funding operating versus how much of it is funding capital and debt. And this is just another way to help residents understand how our budget works. After having some conversations with Austria and Carmela and the mayor and others, what I'm going to do in future presentations is try to extract and not put in so much of the rudimentary discussions like we're in the February 6th presentation talking about where surplus tracks from one line to another, what is surplus, things like that. We're going to have kind of a budget primer that will come out that anybody that wants to learn more about the budget can read ahead of time, because the focus of these meetings, while it being public, it's public for your discussion. So I don't want to take up too much time here teaching people. Having said that, I'm like it, and I'm happy, and I'm into it to just sit down and talk to anybody about how all this stuff works. So if you want to learn more about the municipal budget, that would make my day if you sent me an email. I'd be happy to meet you and talk about it. That's strange. So anyway, any questions on the flow chart here? So, I want to cover this because this is really going to be covered in discussion item 4, but I have the numbers here. This is just a summary of the electric rebate program. This is a targeted rebate program based on income eligibility for certain residents. Last year, we had 380 approved applications, and residents received a $150 rebate on their electricity. It's $57,000. You don't see this as a line item. It basically reduces the revenue that comes in to the electric utility, but it's been an extremely successful program and an appreciated program for Madison's most needy residents, and you'll be discussing that in discussion item 4, but I wanted to have that here. Any questions?
I mean, just one comment. Last year we raised it to 150. I'm glad to see that the number of applications increased back to where they were originally. We've seen a significant fall off, and I think it's good. It's not a ton of money out of the electric utility, but it's very important for the people who do get it. And given the size of the surplus we have, I think it's the least we can do.
So with this, we'll have public discussion, but I've got my marching orders. You all know that the next steps that Austria talked about when she gave her finance report is I've got to now hustle. In 2 weeks, I've really got to work pretty hard to get a user-friendly budget pulled together, the state budget document pulled together. So I'm dealing with a lot of different moving parts numbers that need to get put in different forms. That will be reviewed by our auditor, and then we'll come to you at the first meeting in March for introduction. I appreciate everyone's help, especially Austria and Carmela, with this whole process.
Okay, before we do final deliberations, I will open this to the public for any comments or questions. If you do have questions, what I prefer to do is we capture your questions, and when you're done with any comments and questions, we'll answer them all, so we don't end up with a constant back and forth, which makes us go way past 11 o'clock, and we're less productive. So anyone wishing to comment or ask questions on the budget, please step forward, and if you do, please state your name, your address, write the same on the clipboard, and try to keep your comments and questions to 3 minutes if possible. Thank you. Welcome, Tom.
Glad to be here. Tom Bintinger, 20 Rolling Hill Court. I can't do two things at one time.
Know the feeling.
What I wanted to do was take this opportunity to thank, Mr. Burnett as CFO, the administration, and this council for, may this not be the right adjective, the enthusiastic adoption of the strategic plan and the guidelines that resulted from that as a measurement device to encourage, better knowledge of the citizens of Madison. It really, we feel very rewarded having done that and spent the time. And it's actually being used. This is the second year that it's been put in place. And it's a way, that will continue to have to be looked at. Those guidelines were created at a point in time. Time changes. Circumstances change. And so you'll have to take a look at those again. Are they the right ones? Are those parameters good? And to that extent, it is a continuing effort that has to be done. So one of the items today, Jim's change of the format of the income statement. He's got another way of taking a look at it and trying to present so that it gets a better use, for the ordinary person. And then maybe just to shift my hat as chair of the trustees of the library, I want to thank on behalf of the patrons the continued support of this Borough Council administration to fund, the library. It is a wonderful community resource such that we can continue to adopt our services, be it the collection, be it programming, be it community center. And I'd just like to remind, it is getting to be a 50-year-old building, and so you're seeing some of those capital expenditures in there, and we'll probably be discussing it in the future. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to comment on the budget? Missy.
Hi, Missy Elias, 40 Green Village Road. I guess it's a combination of comment, question, really with respect to pages 4 and 5 on the presentation and the I guess, reductions in capital that you've all been working on since the last meeting. In particular, even though it was a late night, I listened and I watched all of you, in particular, looking at the presentation of the library budget and the public works and engineering budgets, and seeing surprise in a number of your faces at the number and extent of the proposed capital expenditures. And I think it's great that on page 4 you've articulated a large number of reductions, but in my mind, capital expenditures don't necessarily go away, they just get pushed back someplace else. So tying these significant reductions in capital expenditures to the proposed electric adjustment, dividend, whatever, I would just caution you to ensure that you're taking into consideration in future years these reductions in capital expenditures for the next year or two, and I'd like to understand, where they're going to be placed, how they're going to be addressed, etc.
Jim, you want to just comment on
Wait till the end, or you want to do that now?
Yeah, Missy's done with her, okay, so we'll capture it. So it's just, are we jeopardizing?
I don't think we're jeopardizing. What's nice about the dividend concept is that we can, maybe next year it's only $1 million if we need more in capital. As Councilman Rowe mentioned, when you have low oil prices, all of a sudden the cost of road reconstruction and milling and overlay gets reduced significantly. And my hopeful goal in this process is that we get to a stable number for the capital improvement fund line, which is later on in the municipal budget on, let's say on page 9, any of those lines there, when you're looking at how much we're funding in capital, which is a line 30 capital improvement fund. It's how much of tax dollars and revenues we're taking out on an annual basis and putting into a pot to spend. My goal is to find the right number. We think, based on strategic planning, capital, that 3.8 is about the right number, and we're working through it. We'll see. It might be 4.1, might be 4.2.
So bottom line is you have high confidence we're not pushing projects out, making years 6 through 10 look ugly that are not on the chart, that we still have a good plan. Okay. Anyone else wishing to comment or ask questions on the, we'll get through the capital and then we'll comment. But anyone else wishing to comment? Okay, seeing none, close this part of the meeting. Oscar, you wanted to?
No, I just wanted to add on to what Jim said about to Missy's question. On page 4, all these reductions are explained with, we had lower costs, we had inaccurate numbers for the library. So we do know that if we don't get funding for the fire truck, yes, that line may have to be adjusted as we, into another number down the road. But right now we're pretty good with these deductions and where they came from. Thank you.
Right. If we're ready, what I'd like is to entertain a motion to accept the budget as presented with $1.5 million of a rate adjustment for dividend for the electric utility.
So moved.
Second.
Council discussion.
I think I want to start out by saying that these last couple of months working with Jim have been a really great experience for all of the years that I've been here. It's a tremendous difference in how this whole process went through. And I'll tell you, it's been remarkable working with Austria as well. And in case anybody didn't notice, this was Austria. Tom, she worked very hard on this, and she deserves the credit for this. Absolutely. She worked a whole afternoon getting those numbers together, for the strategic planning guidelines as well. I want to say thank you to them as well, and I also like Tom's comment that we have to keep on looking at some of those numbers, because when you look in the back and where all the yeses were, but there are some no's, in the guideline 1B, I said to Jim, 27.2, we're a little over the 25%. Maybe it shouldn't be 25%. So, we're thinking in that process. So, thanks for bringing that up. But really want to say thank you to the administration and the department heads, and for working so hard. And Bob Vogel worked real hard on all of this capital stuff, and the reason that we did it, when you look at the Elmer Street culvert, that we need some legal work to be done before that could be taken care of, and we're hoping for grants and whatever. So I want to say thank you, especially to Jim. Ray is always there in the background, but he did a tremendous job. Thanks for all your patience with us, because I know we asked you lots and lots of questions, and I never lost it once on either Austria or I. To his credit, I want to just say thank you. It was a great presentation. And I think it's a wonderful budget. I'm really very, very pleased this year.
We'll come around the horn. If Austria, have any comments?
No, I said it in the beginning. Thank you.
Ben?
Thank you. I just want to basically reiterate what Carmela just said. The Strategic Planning Committee exercise was something new. We weren't quite sure what to make of it, where it would go. And Jim could have easily said, I don't need this stuff. I've got enough to do without this. And instead, he not only ran with it, but he's improved on some aspects of the initial intent. On the list of objectives we had was to make this budget more accessible to our residents. Feeling was, and I felt it certainly when I joined, and initially was liaison to finance, that it was almost impossible to figure out what was going on. And I think now, if you're interested, you got to take a little time. It doesn't walk and talk to you, but you get paid back. You'll understand this budget without a huge amount of work. And it doesn't take a degree in some advanced science to do it. It's really pretty straightforward. And I also know Jim's sincere. So if you want to talk to him, by all means, he'd love to talk to you about it. Thank you.
I want to thank Jim and the whole administration for the work they did and they do every year on this. I have always taken the budget guidelines very seriously, as people know. This year, everything, with one exception, is moving in the right direction. And that one area, as Jim and I have discussed, there's two guidelines that are kind of in conflict with each other. And so we're going to have to reconcile those, and they have to do with the surplus and the use of surplus. And although we may want to adjust the numbers, I think the key thing that we get from the guidelines is we can see year over year which direction things are heading. And I think that's the most critical function. I'm also happy that we adjusted the size of the temporary rate cut for the electric utility this year from the $1 billion that was originally proposed. I had always said I was looking for somewhere between 8 and 10%. We're getting close to the 8% number, so I'm going to be supportive of it. I think it's going to be sustainable for at least the next 3 or 4 years at that level. But we do have the ability, if we have to scale it back if other needs arise. We do have a lot of money in free balance in the general budget, in the electric budget. We have significant money, I think, that's currently not even earmarked in both the capital, the general capital and the electric capital. So I think we're in very good shape financially, and I think it's a good budget. I'm very happy where it's going. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
And I think as the new member of council, this is my first budget, and I want to thank the strategic plan for coming up with the budget guidelines. They were very helpful in looking through the budget and understanding it. And I would like to thank Jim, who took every single stupid phone call that I made to him, asking him to explain something, and was this legal? And it was an edifying experience, and one that I hope more Madison residents will go through. I think we pay a lot of money in taxes, and I think it's very worthwhile to know where your money is going and how it's being spent, and that it's being spent carefully. And I think all of those things have been achieved in this budget.
Thank you. And just a couple of quick comments. One, just so Maureen's words don't get taken out of context, a reminder that anywhere in New Jersey you pay a lot in property taxes.
Yeah.
And it's great to see that in Madison you get great services in return, and we have our electric utility and other methods to keep that down as much as possible. And regretfully, our students have left because I was going to point out to them, if they were to visit other towns, you would not see towns run this well, nor CFOs that can truly present this, that everyone can understand it, whether you're watching this at home on TV or you're going on Rosenet and pulling up the PowerPoint presentation. So thank you for all your work and everyone for the support. So at this point, I'll call for a roll call vote on the motion, which is budget as presented with a $1.5 million adjustment.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Ms. Byrne?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, item number 2, appropriation of $440,000 from the Electric Capital Improvement Fund for the purchase of 2 double bucket trucks. You want to take that? And these next couple items are, these next 2 items are capital items that, even though we have not done the final approval, because the time sensitivity of them, we're introducing these now, similar as we did the road reconstruction.
That was the explanation.
There you go.
The electric utility superintendent indicated that the 2 bucket trucks that it currently has will be approaching 10 years of age mid-year. And in order to keep them in service by federal law, he has to have them reconditioned and recertified in terms of their hydraulics and the booms, and that will cost approximately $100,000 per vehicle. And in lieu of that, he's recommending that we would purchase 2 double bucket trucks for a cost of $440,000, which is required to maintain the high quality of service of the electric utility. If we went the repair option, we'd be investing $100,000 each in 10-year-old vehicles, and they'd be out of service 3 to 4 months, and he can't operate without having the vehicles. It takes between 6 to 8 months to get the new trucks, so that's why we want to jumpstart it, order the trucks. I know there's a sensitivity to that we'll repeat this in 10 years, so we've had the chat for those people who will be here in 10 years. We probably would not repeat this, and that we would probably purchase one of the vehicles in year 8 and then one in year 10, so we create a stagger between the vehicles. So we're recommending it for approval for introduction.
Anyone want to give feedback, comments?
Yeah, I think Ray covered all the things I was going to ask, but I was concerned this year, and I'll be concerned 10 years down the road because it's a big amount for the department to swallow at once. I was hoping it would get spread out. I should just sitting here thinking, can we lease one for a year by any chance for less than $100,000?
We didn't explore that option.
How much would it cost?
I have no idea.
Okay. All right. I cry uncle.
Certainly what we've started with some of the things is the reserve in advance. And
Yeah.
So for any of us are sitting here in 10 years, we'll make sure we do that starting in year 6 or 7. Any other comments? Okay, this is Ordinance 9, which is listed for introduction. And now the appropriation of $200,000 in general capital for a purchase of portable police radios.
I can do that. This is a similar issue. Chief Datchison, during his budget presentation, indicated there was a concern that some of the radios that are distributed to the patrol division are not operational on a full-time basis, which it creates a safety issue for the officers. So that we're asking the governing body, in the interest of safety for the officers, to jumpstart this. Again, it's a long lead item. It's a $200,000 expenditure. It was in the general capital. There's funds for it, and we think it's important for the safety of the police officers.
And it's a different frequency, right? So you couldn't do a phase. It has to be everything.
All have to be replaced at the same time.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, this is.
And these radios are also going to allow the police department to communicate with other police departments.
Correct.
And the Morris County unit.
Correct.
Okay, this is Ordinance 10, which is listed for introduction. And the 2017 electric utility rebate program, you saw the dollars and some numbers behind that. Ben, you have set that up?
Sure, thank you. Actually, Jim went over the numbers and did a very good job of it. I just want to say that when we began in 2014, we were not quite sure how this program would take. We felt through the data we could find, and it's not easy to find it, that there were approximately 500 family units in town that conceivably would qualify for this. So when I see numbers in the high threes, I feel pretty good about what it's been doing. And we did see a fall off one year. Hard to explain, but people do respond to cash, and when we took it up $50, it made a big difference, and that's a good thing. So we're proposing to stay at last year's level, 150. The requirements and process are unchanged from previous years, and we're estimating that this program should not exceed $70,000. That is an estimate. And just to be very clear, this is in addition to what we talked about earlier with regard to electric rates. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Pat?
I guess one question, and I think Ray mentioned this to me briefly, and we didn't get a chance to explore it, but do we have people set up that the people who are already in the program we go back to automatically every year to let them know that the program has been reinitiated?
Yes, we do. We do send out the application and new information to all the residents that received
Okay.
the rebate,
So,
and as well as everyone in town. We do the electric utility billing, send out.
but I mean, at a minimum, the people who got it last year. And are we able to streamline it in any way, shape, or form for people who already qualified once, or I guess we need to re-qualify them every year because of the regulations? Okay.
We really need to request the proof each year. Okay.
Any other questions? This is Resolution 90 in the consent. Okay, ordinances for hearing. Will the clerk please read the statement?
The ordinance scheduled for hearing was introduced by title and passed on first reading at a regular meeting of the council held on Monday, February the 13th, 2017. It was posted and filed according to law, and copies were made available to the general public requesting same.
I call up Ordinance 8, 2017 for second reading. Ask the clerk to read said ordinance by title.
Ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $140,000 from the Municipal Open Space Trust Fund for restoration and repair of the James Library Building.
I open the hearing for Ordinance 8. Anyone wishing to comment, please step forward. Seeing none, I close the hearing.
Mayor, I move Ordinance 8-2017.
I'll second that.
Any council discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Ms. Byrne?
Yes.
I declare Ordinance 8-2017 adopted and finally passed, and ask the clerk to publish notice of it in the newspaper and file the ordinance in accordance with the law. And now we're on to our second or third for tonight, invitation for discussion. This is when you may comment on anything, and we're also down to our dedicated audience at this point. If anyone wishing to comment, please step forward, state your name, your address, and write the same on the clipboard, and try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Welcome, John.
Thanks. John Hoover, 17 Overhill Drive. I have two comments. One, my typical theme is we've got 7 people here tonight, absent the students from Drew, to listen to an incredibly important meeting. And we on the outside can only do so much to encourage people to come, and we do. But I would encourage the council, if you also would like to have more people attend these meetings, to take on an initiative to promote coming to council meetings and the benefits thereof. I really would hope you would do that. Yes, people do watch the video, but they can't interact with us. Okay, they cannot interact. And I would like to see more people attend and more people interact. Okay, that's item number 1. Item number 2, on the dividend versus rebate versus whatever you're going to call it, at some point, well, first of all, I would opt for dividend, but at some point, somebody's going to say, gee, you're taking the money away from me and then you're giving it back. And you're doing it a year after year, and hopefully that's what happens. At some point, it's going to lead into a discussion of a rebate. I mean, a reduction in the cost, okay? So I just need everybody to be aware of that. I think it's going to happen at some point. Hopefully it does, okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, I close this part of the meeting. And we move on to introduction of ordinances. Will the clerk please read the statement?
The ordinance is scheduled for first reading, have a hearing date set for Monday, March the 13th, 2017. All will be published in the Madison Eagle, posted on the bulletin board, made available to members of the public requesting copies.
I call up ordinances for first reading and ask the Borough Clerk to read said ordinances by title.
Ordinance 9, 2017, ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $440,000 from the Electric Capital Improvement Fund for purchase of 2 double bucket trucks.
Mayor, I move ordinance 9-2017.
I'll second that.
Any further council discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Ms. Byrne?
Yes.
Ordinance 10, 2017.
Ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $200,000 from the Electric Capital Improvement Fund for purchase of portable police radios.
Mayor, I'll move ordinance 10-2017.
Second.
Any further council discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Ms. Byrne?
Yes.
Consent agenda resolutions. Will the clerk please read the statement?
Consent agenda resolutions will be enacted with a single motion. Any resolution requiring expenditure is supported by a certification of availability of funds. Any resolution requiring discussion will be removed from the consent agenda. All resolutions will be reflected in full in the minutes.
Mayor, I'll move resolution R77-2017 to R93-2017.
Second.
Any discussion or any that need to be pulled? Okay. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Ms. Byrne?
Yes.
There's no unfinished business. The approval of vouchers.
Vouchers. The current fund, $6,193,205.81. General Capital Fund, $20,243.61. Electric Operating Fund, $1,288,651. Water Operating Fund, $3,287.40. And the trust account, $85,571.85. The total is $7,590,959.67.
Mayor, I move approval of the vouchers.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Out of the room.
I said yes.
Yes. Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
And Ms.
Yes.
Okay, there is no new business.
Mayor, I move we adjourn.
All in favor? All right. Well done.
Ben's back.
Stick to the better end.
Well, that's,
In case
Your report was on here anyway. The resolutions.
Obviously, nobody did.
Here it goes away.
Why did you stay the whole time? You just love being here at night, huh? You're nuts.